Hello and greetings, my friend. Welcome back again to the next episode here of the Red Delta Project podcast, live feed Q&A with another episode to help you be fit and live free. I'm your host, as always, Matt Schifferly, and today we are discussing more information on my upcoming program called Beautiful Strength and why strength in all of its forms and facets, both externally in our body and within emotional strength, mental strength, lifestyle strength, helps to elevate you to a higher level of attractiveness. And the reason why we're addressing this today is because a couple of videos that I've been making on the RDP channel, and I even got a couple questions on this about the importance of being resilient. I keep using the word resiliency, although I don't think that's a real word. And if it is, I'm going to trademark it, want a nickel every time someone uses it. But the importance of resilience in developing your strength in all facets, but also why fragility can be such a liability and such a, well, an unattractive trait. And yet, despite the fact that being weak and frail is not a good look for anybody, and it can severely hold back the development of your physique and your performance and your health, there are so many aspects in our conventional approaches to diet and exercise that actually promote exactly that kind of fragility and weakness in the pursuit of, ironically enough, the opposite of building strength. And we're going to be looking today about how you compromise your strength physically, mentally, emotionally, and two of the biggest keys that are so easy to implement, yet very few people ever use when it comes to a healthy lifestyle and their approach to diet and exercise that can make you far more resilient and improve your beautiful strength. So stay tuned. Also, I need to mention too, this is the last day of November. Thanksgiving was just a couple of days ago. And yes, this year I am going to be doing my Red Delta Project Advent calendars. I always do. A new video coming out here on the YouTube channel every single day, all about this year's theme is, well, as you can probably guess, beautiful strength. We're going to be discussing tips on how to build a better physique, how to improve upon some of the conventional exercises to make them safer and more effective at building yourself up, shape, tone, basically body sculpting, if you will. But we'll also, of course, be addressing tips and ideas from a philosophical perspective to make you develop some of that much more attractive inner strength as well, because what good is having great abs and shred biceps when your whole demeanor and your body language and everything is just basically well, I wouldn't say repelling people, but very unattractive, which again happens very often in our fitness culture where we think all I need to do is have a better body or have a less weight, lose weight, and I'll be more attractive. And oftentimes we adopt some very unattractive mindsets and unattractive habits and lifestyle habits that really compromise the very attractiveness that we are going for. So let's jump right into it. We're going to start superficially and kind of work our way in today. We're talking about how a lot of conventional approaches to exercise can greatly inhibit your basically resilient abilities. And one of the first things that's so important when it comes to becoming more resilient is the ability to develop stability. Stability is a concept and a ingredient that has long been involved in the programs and stuff that I've been creating ever since grind style calisthenics, isometrics, a lot of my progressive and suspension calisthenics. I've always made stability a cornerstone of things for the sake of safety and effectiveness. And that's also because a lot of times when people are struggling to have their workouts be as effective as they want, it's because they're lacking stability. They don't have the stability in the three key areas: their lumbar region, particularly their core, their abs, their hips, which is very unstable in many cases. A lot of people struggle to simply stand on one leg, and in your shoulders, the shoulder blades, and the glenohumeral joint, which is why things like shoulder issues and shoulder problems are so prevalent within our fitness culture. Because when we are more stable, we have a greater ability to handle stress. Basically, if you want to really kind of think of the resilience that we're trying to build, that's kind of the way we want to look at it. It's just simply the ability to handle stress. It's that old adage of don't pray for an easy life, instead work for the strength to handle a difficult one. And that's what makes it so attractive is that when we see people in our orbit who can handle the stressors of life with ease, then we're like, oh, that person is resilient. That person can have things kind of go sideways on them, and yet they don't bat an eye. They don't crumble. They don't break so easily. And there's a very inherent primal need as human beings to associate ourselves with those qualities, which is why resilience is so attractive. And being physically stable is exactly it. It's not like there was one time, there's a funny story about this guy I saw in a squat rack, and he had like 5 different types of apparatuses that he was using in his barbell back squats. He had like knee wraps, he had wrist wraps, funny enough. He had a belt around his core. He had bands also around his thighs. And he also had like 2 or other straps that physically attached him to the machine. He looked like he was practically getting like suited up Iron Man style in order to do these squats. And it's because all of this stuff was trying to build up some sort of stability to him. And I don't mean to make fun of anybody. I don't know if he had any sort of maybe a health issue or injury or something that he needed all that in order to be safe. But the bottom line is all of that external apparatuses is providing stability that we inherently should be providing for ourselves through the use of our musculature and our coordination, which we'll also talk about in a little bit. And so when we are training in environments where the stability is provided to us from external things like benches and supports and machines and things like that, then we just simply don't have as much opportunity to develop our own stability. And that's not to say, oh, don't train on the leg press and don't use machines and stuff. By all means, go for it. Just know that you are leaving a little bit on the table because that inherent stability gives you the ability to handle just physical forces that are coming through your body. So another story that kind of gives us a little bit of a perspective is I was training a young woman back in Vermont back in the day. And this is really early on in my training of calisthenics as a primary discipline. And she was like, oh my gosh, this was the craziest thing that happened to me this weekend. I was like, what happened? She's like, oh, I was at some sort of like a gala or a ball or something. She's like, I had this really nice, like classic dress, the little black dress kind of thing. And she's like, I was wearing heels and everything. And in front of everybody, I walked over a wet patch on the floor. They had just cleaned it or something. And suddenly, before she knew it, she just completely, like her feet went out from underneath her and she was total Matrix in the slow motion in the air. And she's like, I don't know what happened. All of a sudden, my feet were above my head and I was all over the place. And like a cat, she just pivoted and rotated and she landed on the ground, kind of like a, superhero warrior pose that you see in all the Marvel movies and stuff. And she was like, it was so cool because I could have really gotten hurt and I wasn't. I was totally fine. And everyone around me started like applauding, like good save kind of action. And that is what stability gives us. It gives us the ability, physically at least, that when the unexpected happens in life and we suddenly find ourselves dealing with forces kind of outside our control, we can still be able to handle it in a safe way. Couple that with someone who is like, oh yeah, I'm big and I'm strong and I can deadlift 800 pounds, and they throw their back out when they pick up their car keys. Or someone who is, utilizing just basic exercise and they just step funny and, my knee kind of thing. Because that, I'll tell you, been working in gyms for well over 2 decades now. The most dangerous thing that people do by far, where people have the most injuries, is simply getting up and on off of some sort of a like aerobics step. That is by far the most dangerous thing I've ever seen people do, because that's when people always seem to hurt themselves. It's never lifting the big weights or doing anything with a lot of coordination. It's just simply stepping off a curb and they twist their ankle, or just jumping a little bit sideways in order to scoot something out of the way, and suddenly they blow out their knee or something of that nature. It's always those little things, and that's why being resilient is so important, is because it's never the big stuff that's going to get you, because oftentimes you will go to that exercise or that activity and be like, okay, I got to get ready. Let me stand just right. Let me get my hands right. Okay, a couple deep breaths. All right, good, fine, warm up. I got my wrist wraps on. I got my knee wraps on. It's like, okay, here we go. Because you've got all that stuff, kind of your ducks in a row. It's always the stuff you're just not even thinking about. It's the stuff of stepping off an aerobic step or bending over just to pick something up like a book bag or something, and There you go. So by building up our physical resilience in our shoulders, our spine, and our hips gives us that bulletproofness to handle those sorts of situations that just come out of the blue and they just catch you by surprise. So that's why we implement crawling work, shifting work in our warm-ups for all of the stuff that I do, but particularly like grind style calisthenics and the Beautiful Strength program is we're trying to build up the stability in our body. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't, no, you don't need like balance discs and Bosu balls and all these sorts of things. That's a different kind of stability that usually doesn't help you out a whole heck of a lot. I'm just talking about, can you control your body in space in relatively, I wouldn't say unusual, but unstable scenarios. The T-plank, the simple T-plank that I utilize in my warm-ups all the time. If you look at some of the videos I posted the past couple of weeks of some of my Beautiful Strength workout programs, you'll see me doing a couple T-planks in the warm-up. Why? Because it stabilizes our spine, our hips, and our shoulders all at once. Very simple exercise, does not take a lot of strength or coordination to do it, but that pays heavy dividends in improving your physical stability and making you a lot more resilient in your training. Tension control is another aspect of resilience, physical resilience. And this is not necessarily the type of tension control that's often addressed in our fitness culture, because a lot of times, I speak of tension control, sometimes people will talk about it as the mind-muscle connection. And man, the number of times that people have been like, it's bunk, it's bro science, it's not really real and stuff like that. And I used to be just that guy who used to criticize these things until I realized that the vast majority of my potential to either do well or hurt myself was very much down to that mind-muscle connection, aka tension control. And improving that tension control made me far more resilient with everything I did. But poor tension control makes you extremely fragile and much more susceptible to injury. Why? It's simple. It's because tension control is simply your ability to engage your muscles at will, something that is constantly being eroded and under threat through modern day life. I'm sitting in a chair, and just the act of sitting is telling my glutes and my muscles along my posterior chain and my hips to just not work very much. And muscles you don't engage very much to a good degree are just going to kind of go to sleep a little bit. Your brain's not going to realize how to engage those muscles very well. And then if you do an exercise that's supposed to engage those muscles, but your mind has trouble engaging them, it doesn't matter what your technique is like. It doesn't matter if the muscles supposed to be working during an exercise. If your brain has trouble engaging those muscles, it simply won't, and it's going to put the force somewhere else in your body, which puts you out of alignment. And a misalignment of even a little bit can be catastrophic and make you very fragile. We martial artists inherently know this. Like the classic example my instructor used to always say is like, your wrist needs to be straight when you punch. If you have good tension control in your forearms and everything, you can put your fist through concrete and be totally fine. But then my instructor would take my hand and he'd like get us in some sort of a joint lock and everything. And he'd be like, look, all it takes is the pressure of my single pinky. And he'd be like, dink. And I'd be like, oh, my wrist, tap, 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 tap. Oh my gosh. And he's like, that's the power of misalignment, is it takes no force whatsoever to cause injury, to cause pain, and to hurt yourself. But if you have good alignment, you can have an unbelievable amount of force against the exact same tissues and joints and be perfectly fine. And so when we have better tension control, we can allow the forces that our body naturally experiences due to the resistance against gravity and, during a forward roll or if we're getting struck or something, and the force goes through our body rather than into it. Because if I have good tension control from head to toe and I have a bar on my back or I'm doing an exercise like a handstand or something, I'm having force go through my joints, at which point, perfectly fine, perfectly safe. You can have hundreds of pounds, thousands of pounds in some cases of force going through your body. You're perfectly okay, not a problem at all. You're strong, you're resilient. But if you have poor alignment because your glutes aren't firing, because you have poor stability in your hips and your shoulders, because your back isn't really well engaged, it takes nothing to cause pain and injury because you're fragile. You're like the fragile, porcelain doll. You just drop it a little bit and shatters. versus something like basketball, and you can bounce that thing on the floor thousands of times and you're perfectly fine. So having the tension control and that stability, as I mentioned before, is so important for your resiliency, because if you don't have it, you are inherently fragile. And unfortunately, a lot of uh, approaches to fitness that teach us to be rigid, like literally physically rigid, keep your back straight, keep your shoulders back, don't move. And you're like doing curls as if you're locked into position and stuff. There are situations where that is for the sake of safety, but shift work, crawling, things of that nature that we implement are about moving your spine, moving your shoulder blades, moving yourself so force can travel through your body rather than going into your joints, which is where you can easily cause injury. No matter how strong your tendons, your ligaments, and everything are. I get that all the time where people are like, how do I make my tendons and ligaments stronger? It's like, well, inherently they're stronger than muscle anyway. You shouldn't need to strengthen them. But if you're feeling pain, it's usually not because of an inherent weakness in that tissue. It's because you have a misalignment somewhere. Let's get to some more questions before I get into one of the last aspects of why you need to have good resilience, physical resilience in your training. Real results training. It's good to see you, as always. Saying, Matt, apologize if you already mentioned this. When will Beautiful Strength be available to purchase? Honestly, I'm not sure. This is by far been the hardest book for me to write. I have rewritten the entire thing about 9 times by now, and it is quite the challenge. I'm hoping to get it out as soon as possible by the end of the year, for sure. But as I've been long telling folks, that the good news is it's not out, it's coming out. All of the information in that book is being trickled out here on my podcast and my YouTube channel and stuff. So, and again, the RDP Advent calendar, where I'm going to be making a separate video every single day up until December 24th, will also be sharing with you a lot of the tips and ideas in it. So it's coming out in bits and pieces here, but the official release hopefully by the end of the year. Larry coming on. Matt recently read about 2 different training methods, pitting muscle against muscle. Yep, I've done that a lot. I spent a lot of time doing that, especially when I was in Japan. And pushing with one hand against the arm curls through or isometric hold and so forth. Ran out of time. Straight, which is better? It's like, basically remember, folks, that when it comes to strength training, you just need the resistance. So when we're evaluating if an exercise or an approach is effective, look at it more along the lines of which one makes it easier for me, or for you rather, to have the ability to pit resistance against the muscles. And with that as your compass needle, you may find that you inherently are like, oh, this method over here allows me to put more resistance against the muscles, or this method over here, or this type of exercise, it allows me to really generate a lot more tension in the muscle. That's what you want to be looking for as the kind of active ingredient in the training. It doesn't matter what someone says, like, oh, this type of exercise is the best. For whatever reason, if you inherently have trouble implementing enough resistance with that and getting enough tension out of the muscle, then it's not going to be quite as effective. You could read all day long, oh, free weights are best for building muscle. Free weights are best. You go into your basement and all you got are a couple of 5-pound dumbbells, but you've got some suspension straps and a pull-up bar. Well, you're going to get a hell of a lot more resistance just because of the resources you have from the bodyweight training than with your dumbbells. So utilize whatever is going to give you the best ability to keep tension and resistance on the muscles. Now, for my money, isometric holds will beat the muscle against muscle kind of approach, for the simple fact that you're utilizing Newton's, I believe it's the second law of motion here, in both cases. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction, which is fundamentally how all strength training works, but it really implements with the muscle against muscle and isometric hold type of approach. And so because you're moving, you can't have as much tension in the muscle. That's one of the reasons why isometrics is the purest form of strength training available. And many people find that they can work their muscles with the most resistance with isometrics. Because the second you start moving, you have to drastically reduce the amount of tension in the muscle in order to make the movement possible. And when you're going muscle against muscle kind of approaches, it's kind of difficult to allow your muscle to work hard enough while at the same time being relaxed enough in order to have movement. Now, within moving against gravity with like a free weight or body weight exercise, you can at least manage it a little bit better, so it makes it more consistent. So that's why my personal approach has been that the muscle against muscle approach has been kind of hit or miss compared to the isometrics. But play with both. You may find that one is better for some exercises, and then another one is better for other types. So it's not like you need to go with one or the other. Couple more here before we jump back into topics. So Molly is saying, what do you think about half rep push-ups? I find the half rep method, I like it. So generally, when it comes to training, dynamic training, of course, because we were just talking about isometrics, the more range you get, the better you're going to get for results in general. For really broad kind of approach to things, more range is going to just be better results. Deeper, longer, more up, more down. Now, a lot of times people will use the more difficult part in the range of motion in order to get more repetitions, which if you're in a push-up competition and they're not looking at range of motion, well, yeah, do whatever's going to get you the higher numbers, because you're not doing that to be stronger or get in shape. You're doing it to win a contest, which is why sport and fitness are very different from one another. Do not try to get in shape via sport. You get in shape for sport. It's very, very different. The minute you make it a game, you're going backwards in many respects when it comes to actual fitness and conditioning. But I digress a little tangent there. But yeah, generally, if you use bigger range of motion, you're just going to get better, more out of it for the most part. Shorter range of motion can be a specific thing that people will utilize. Sometimes range of motion can be a progressive element, like when people do box squats or bench press with boards under the chest. Convict conditioning uses this a lot, where they'll have you doing things like push-ups down to a basketball to shorten your range of motion, and then you get comfortable with that, and then you increase your range. But generally, more range is better results. Going all the way up, it's like, well, okay, but I'm always in the hard part. Okay, yeah, but coming all the way up will teach you more stability in the shoulder blades, bigger stretch in that back, giving you a little bit more range, getting the full lockout on the triceps and stuff. So generally, I will always recommend more range is better. More range is just better. Unless you have a reason to go with a shorter range, go for the bigger range. It helps with the resilience. It makes you stronger. And that's one of the reasons why, like, a lot of times when we are more fragile, it's because we've been working a lot in shorter ranges of motion. I certainly know that inherently because I was a bike racer for many years. Biking was my main sport. And, people will call out strength training for making you stiff and fragile. If you think strength training will make you stiff and fragile, you ain't seen nothing on cardio yet. Cardio is way more fragility enhancing because you're taking a very short range exercise, typically, and you're going repeatedly telling your body you're only strong and safe in this very short range of motion, like when I was on a bike. And then as soon as my legs had to go beyond that, it was like, whoa, holy smokes, we can't handle this. We can't stabilize you. We can't give you security in this. So as a result, I got tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter because my range of motion was constantly telling my nervous system, you're only safe, strong, and stable in this very, very short range. So by strength training through bigger ranges, you build up that resiliency as well. The other thing that we want to look at is spinal stiffness that I wanted to mention. This was brought to my attention. I got a YouTube link the other day from I don't like the word follower, just a fellow member of the community. And he was in the video, there was a strength training guy. It was an old natural bodybuilder, where he was talking about how not moving and utilizing your spinal movement is a big mistake. Because he's like, every time we're doing all of this weighted stuff with external loads, we got to keep our spine locked in place. You got to keep your spine straight all the time, which absolutely is true when you're lifting big, heavy loads. But the problem is when lifting big, heavy loads is your only primary way of physical conditioning, you're always locking your spine in place. And as a result, it's going to get tight, stiff, and I would argue weak, because you're not moving it through any type of range of motion, even under resistance. And your spine is like any other joint. If it doesn't move, it again gets that neural conditioning of you're only strong and safe in a very, very narrow range. And that's why you can have that guy who can deadlift 1,000,000 pounds, but they'll throw their back out picking up their car keys, is because they've only trained themselves to be strong and resilient in a very small range of their physical ability. And that's certainly true with your back, especially when you consider that a lot of us are sitting a whole lot in our cars, at desk, and everything like that. And then you go into the gym and you're on machines, you're on benches. And even if you're not on those things, you're doing exercises where the coaches are saying you'd better keep your back straight. So we're just taking this long segment of many joints that runs from your basically your tailbone to the base of your skull, that's meant to move and have mobility, and has, not to mention, a lot of muscles that run up and down it that can be easily injured if it's not well conditioned. And we're basically making it frail. In other words, you can have all your distal muscles, like in your arms and your legs and your chest and even your back, fairly strong, but that central core area of your body is as fragile as porcelain glass. There's no wonder we get so hurt. There's no wonder we can barely move. And as I address in Beautiful Strength, it's not just what your body looks like, it's also how you can move. How well can you move? There's a reason why it's a meme out there of the big, strong, huge, muscular bodybuilder who kind of walks like a penguin. They're waddling back and forth, and they're just kind of walking like the Tin Man kind of thing. It's like, yeah, they've got a lot of strength in their distal muscles, but that core strength in their spine is just not there. So while everything on the outside is kind of strong, your inner, muscles and joints and stuff are ready to snap. So again, that's why we have stability exercises. That's why we use crawling and shift work, things that move your spine, particularly under resistance. It's not a bad thing. Again, that's where we get a lot of dogma stuff. It's like, oh my gosh, he's squatting with a rounded back. Yeah, that's perfectly fine. In fact, that's in most cases how your spine is supposed to move, as long as you don't have a heavy bar on your back and stuff. That's how squats are meant to be done for most people. Locking your spine into place and never letting it move is not natural. It's not how we have evolved to work. And that's why a lot of shift work and things like that can be a godsend for relieving back pain, bridge work, side planks as well. I get a lot of flack for including side planks in my programs because it's not a hardcore exercise. It's something that usually people are like, well, isn't that for just newbies and people doing some yoga warm-ups and stuff like that? It's like, you have no idea how many people have come to me and they're like, I did side planks and a lot of my back issues went away. It's like, yeah, because you're utilizing the muscles along your spine through a range of motion that you weren't allowed to use before. So of course it's going to be stronger and much more resilient. So the shift work and the stability and the tension control, these are not just there because they help you build muscle and strength and build a body that looks and moves a lot better, but also just makes you a lot more resilient so that you just don't get injured as much and you have the ability to weather a lot of stress that's inevitably going to be coming your way. A couple more questions here. Camille coming on saying, Matt, I was wondering, how can I find an optimized position for a pike push-up? So optimization is one of the worst things that we can have in our fitness culture that, again, promotes fragility. And this is where we're kind of going. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but we might as well talk about it now, is when we have a mental and emotional fragility as it pertains to life and fitness. I don't care if your body is strong. If mentally and emotionally you're frail, you're still going to be perceived as inherently weak to those around you, and it's going to radically decrease your attractive appeal. Now, I know you're not really talking about that, Camille. I mean, you're just saying, where do I go for pike push-up kind of thing? But this is what we want to address with this, and you just gave me a good segue here. I appreciate that. Is thinking that there's one correct, best way to do things. There's one best diet. There's one best workout. There's one correct way to do a technique. I just mentioned, if I do squats sometimes, bodyweight squats, inevitably someone on YouTube is going to be like, he's rounding his back. He's got butt wink. Doesn't he know that's bad for you? No, it's not bad for you. In fact, I would argue it's extremely healthy, and you should be utilizing that type of range of motion in your spine and at least some type of exercise in your training repertoire, because a spine that does not move is a fragile spine. So when we get a dogmatic perspective of this is the right way, everything else is wrong, this is the one correct way to do it, everything else is bad or something, that's when we become more fragile, because we lose, again, the ability to move. We lose the ability to just adapt and change to what's going on. It's like, well, if I can't do it this way, everything is wrong. Everything is off. And you find that people who have mental and emotional or inner weakness and fragility about their training, it's like, oh my gosh, I just walked into the gym and my favorite treadmill is out of order. Oh, my workout is ruined, kind of thing. It's like, no, dude, you're fine. It's like, oh gosh, I can't get to the gym today, or I don't have my heart rate monitor. I can't get in my optimal heart rate zone. Oh, my whole workout is ruined right now, and I can't do a proper workout. That is not the sign of someone who's disciplined and trying to stay on the straight and narrow. The straight and narrow leads to weakness, my friends. It does not make you strong. It does not make you resilient. It teaches you that you can only be happy, healthy, and productive when things are perfect. And nothing weakens you and makes you frail like the pursuit of perfectionism and optimization, because it teaches you, it basically trains you to say you're only okay in a very narrow set of circumstances. Once you are outside of that, you're screwed. That is not the way to be resilient. That does not build your beautiful strength. All right, so Camille, I promise, coming back, this idea of optimal for pike push-up. Basically, any kind of push-up, any angle you're at, any width, any way that you're using your hands, as long as you're getting a general overhead style movement, you're good. Okay, you'll get the folks who are like, this is the one correct way to do pike push-ups. If you do it this way, it's wrong. Bonkers, wrong. Unless there's some sort of litmus test or some governing body that's saying we're judging you on this, there's no such thing as a wrong technique unless it's making you unsafe. So when people start doing pike push-ups, what I usually do is I have them start with a good A-frame formation. Their weight is equal on hands and feet. And I have them just kind of come down, touch their forehead to the floor, and then back up. If they can't do that, I'll have them do a negative. If they can't do that, I'll even have them do it on your knees. Where you kind of go into like a child's pose, where your butt's back by your heels, and you just kind of shift forward, and then you push yourself back on your hands. That's fine too. It's just reducing or regressing the technical demand of the exercise. Then, of course, if you bring from an A-frame position and you bring yourself more up, because a lot of people say that's the one correct way to do it, which is nonsense, where you're basically more upright with a vertical position and bringing your head down. That's usually what people covet as a quote proper pike push-up style, because you're getting more weight on your hands. That's all it is. There's nothing special about it. You're just putting more weight on your hands, more resistance, you're going to get stronger. But if you struggle with that, it's not a good position for you. Remember, we don't want to go with what's right, according to some expert of the masses. We want to go with what's right for you. So if you're doing pike push-ups and you're all the way back and your weight is all the way back on your heels, and your hands are even up on a workbench or like a weight bench in order to reduce resistance, it doesn't matter if someone says that's wrong. It's right for you because you're achieving the fundamental objective in the safest way for you. And so that's where you want to be looking at is what's not optimal, what's optimal for you, what's good for you. Some days you may be stronger, so you should probably get your hands on the floor and lean forward more. Some days you may be weaker. You're like, okay, I'm going to have my hands a little bit wider and I'm going to rock my weight back onto my heels and I'm going to bend my knees more in order to make the exercise a little bit easier. It's always just about progression and regression. That's all you're dealing with. It's like saying, what is the correct weight for a bench press? There's no correct weight. It's whatever is best for you and your circumstances and what your goals are. So with the pike push-up, as long as you're basically moving your hands in roughly a vertical pressing, shoulder pressing movement, you're getting the job done. Cheers. You're good for it. So Zerol is saying, is it unhealthy to bend your back forward to pick some weight up off the floor? Not inherently, because it's perfectly fine to do, provided though that the weight is not overloading the spine, that you have stability in your spine, because you can still flex your spine and be stable. It's just many of us aren't taught to do it. You're still engaging your glutes and your hamstrings as your primary ways of picking things up too. That's usually, again, where the tension control screws people over. And, a lot of times it depends on what you're picking up. There's always jokes out there you see on social media and stuff of people like, okay, this is the one proper way to pick things up. And it shows them like having to go and like pick up a book off the floor, and he like gets ready like it's a 500-pound deadlift, and he like gets his feet set and his back is straight and he gets his arms up and down and like has perfect deadlift form to pick up the book. And it just goes to show just like how much of how silly that is. It's like, yeah, just reach down and grab it up off the floor. It's not like if you don't move your back it's going to be in bad shape for you. We're meant to move our spine, but when your spine is fragile, keep in mind you're probably more susceptible to injury with anything. So that's why you want to implement things like bridge work, side planks, cat cow, utilize a little bit of spinal movement with your exercises. So it's very situational there. It could be a bit risky, but it's not inherently dangerous in and of itself, is basically what I'm saying. Philip is asking on the new IsoFlex, will you do a review of the new IsoStrap product by Paul Wade as soon as it comes out? Can we get some ideas for programming for it? Although it's not just calisthenics. Love your philosophy. Thank you. Yeah, I'll be doing tons of stuff on that sort of thing. I'll be getting one myself, and we'll keep you guys updated on that. But it will certainly be step up. I'm really excited to get my hands on it. I like a lot of the things that Paul is bringing to the table with the new IsoFlex product. All right, so we're talking about fragility, not just physical, but also mental and emotional fragility and how it compromises your beautiful strength. But before we do that, one more thing on physical, but this is also pertaining to mental and emotional as well, is how a lot of conventional dietary approaches make you weak and frail as well. Again, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Because a lot of times when we fall into dietary aspects of things, where it's like, okay, this is the correct diet. Don't eat these foods, eat these foods. That's where a lot of dietary approaches are born off of. Is like you're supposed to restrict yourself. And that's a big part of our fitness culture. But that's not going to make you strong, my friend. That's not going to make you robust for several reasons. The first of which is simple physical things. Kind of got in trouble at a gym one time when I was talking to a new client, and I don't think I was being snarky about this, but he reported me later on with it where, this is back when in the mid 2000s, CrossFit was all the rage and the paleo diet and everything was like the be all end all to healthy eating. And he was saying how his, as someone he knew, I think it was his son, was all big in paleo diet, paleo diet, paleo diet. And his father was like, yeah, and then one morning, just on a whim, he had a donut and he felt terrible. He just really didn't feel very good after eating that one donut. And I was like, yeah, that can happen under that diet. Is you basically, you're out of shape for all those other foods. And because that's exactly what diets do, is they condition you to be able to handle the foods you eat, and they make you unable to handle the foods you don't eat very well. And a lot of times that gets kind of misconstrued a little bit, where someone like that will eat the donut, feel like crap, and be like, oh, see, that proves that donuts are bad for you. But that's not at all the case, because I could say the same exact thing to someone who hasn't been running for a while. They go out and run a 5K, and the next day their legs are really, really sore. It's like, see, that proves running's really bad for you. You wouldn't feel that way if you didn't run. That means running is it's very bad for you. You shouldn't do it. It's like, no, dude, I'm just out of shape. If I ran more, I wouldn't be sore, and that'd be fine. It's the exact same thing with diet. If you are excluding big, huge dietary food groups, and then you add some of that in, sometimes in a hedonistic, unbridled overconsumption of that thing, of course you're going to feel like crap, because your body's not used to it. The foods you eat are conditioning you to handle and successfully process and digest and utilize those foods. So if you don't eat any kind of animal products for a while, or any sort of like donuts, processed foods, carbohydrates, sugars, and stuff, of course you're going to feel like crap afterwards, because you become weak at handling those things. You've become deconditioned, which is why a lot of times these very restrictive dietary policies will set you up to be more fragile. You're like, okay, I'm good. My body is healthy and strong and fine as long as I can get the perfect foods and the perfect meals in my diet. But as soon as I eat a steak or pizza or whatever outside of that, oh man, I'm not going to be in good shape. It's like, yeah, you're more susceptible to injury. You're fragile. You're fragile. And I'm speaking with this because I was that way for many years myself, doing those exact same things. I would eat something, like going to a birthday party. I was like, well, I guess all I got is pepperoni pizza. I'd eat it and I'd be like, oh, now I feel like crap. Yeah, because I was fragile at the time, because I couldn't eat so many of, nothing junk foods, all that sort of thing. But now I just eat it, it's fine. No problems, no negative consequences. So the dietary aspects and stuff can certainly make us less resilient to just having more variety in our diets. And it can get usually worse, especially with those who have a very restrictive dietary approach, as the means of progress. So they keep restricting their diet more and more and more and more and more. And before you know it, it's like they can barely eat anything other than kale chips and Evian water kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, you're going to not be very resilient about that sort of thing. So it's just something to keep in mind. I'm not saying don't do diets and stuff. It's just when your diet is based on restriction as your primary mode of improvement and progress, you are more liable to have fragility about that sort of thing. Michael saying, perfect topic to shame us after Thanksgiving. Au contraire, my friend. The thing is, actually, I'm looking forward to this next week because I swear, as a coach for the past 20 some odd years, the week after Thanksgiving is when people, bow, and they blast off and they hit all kinds of PRs. Why? Because for many people, they spent the past 5 6 days getting a lot more rest and eating a lot more food. And that, funny enough, that makes you a lot stronger. I know, hard to imagine. Makes you stronger, makes you more resilient, makes you come to your workouts with more to the table, so to speak. So I love Thanksgiving. I think it's a great thing for a lot of people. Joseph, good to talk to you again, my friend. So Matt, when I do sissy squats, should I let my knees touch the floor way down? Do them. Now I get deep for 10 reps, for 3 close to that don't, not so much. So yeah, we're talking range of motion yet again. Now yeah, sure, touch the floor if you can manage it there, Joseph, but make sure you have your tension, in your glutes, your calves, your hamstrings, and of course your quads. Do you come down and then that last inch, you're losing the tension somewhere and you're just kind of dropping down? That's not going to be good. A lot of times people will say that sissy squats are bad for the knees, and they absolutely can be if you don't have the tension control and the stability going on. But if you've got the tension control and your whole leg is working, your hips are working, you're engaged, you're stable and stuff, yeah, they're about as hard on your knees as walking down a flight of stairs. Perfectly fine. And this is coming from someone whose knees have been shot to hell for most of their life. But I love sissy squats. They're my favorite leg exercise. So use the range that you can with control. If you're finding, well, I can get that range, but I'm kind of dropping and my knees are hitting the floor, then yeah, go with a shorter range. That's fine. Use the range you can control. I know I said earlier, more range is better, but that's under the caveat that you can control that range, that you have that tension control right there. So talking about the dietary thing, this dovetails into what I was talking about kind of, again, a little bit earlier about mental and emotional resilience. Because a lot of times, again, with the idea of optimization, things have got to be perfect, things have got to be done the right way. That makes us fragile. That makes us very susceptible to breakdown when things don't quite go our way. We just had Thanksgiving here. We're heading into the holidays. Now is the time of year where people's fragility gets exposed with their diet and their exercise habits. Lots of stuff out there is like, here's how to go through the holidays, eat well in the holidays, not gain weight on the holidays, yada, yada, right? This is stuff that is exposing fragility. If your diet and exercise habits are resilient, if your mind is resilient, and you're not emotionally going to break down just because you have an eggnog or a brandy or something with some Christmas cookies, then the holidays are nothing. They're no consequence to you whatsoever. You go into them, you're like not worried at all, no stress, no anxiety at all when it comes to diet and exercise. And then you come out the other side and you're like, yep, no problem at all. Didn't worry about it at all. No problem, no issues. However, if you've got so much of a mental, emotional, or even physical fragility about your habits, and you're like, I got to get everything just perfect. I got to stay on my diet, my workout program, no matter what during the holidays. I can't eat that cookie if it's offered to me. I can't let eggnog touch my lips. Oh, my heavens, I better get my macronutrients perfect during Thanksgiving dinner and all that. That is not the sign of someone who's strong, my friends. That is rigidity. That is not resilience. So when we are going in the holidays, being adaptive and not getting too caught up in getting things just right. Because there's this idea out there that our body is like this porcelain doll. A lot of fear mongering out there, and our fitness culture promotes that idea. Like, you better do this right. You better get this just right. And if you step one toe over that line and color outside the lines just a little bit from this optimal program, you're screwed. Oh, you are so in trouble. It's, you're going to kill your gains, bro. And all. No, you're not. Eat the pizza at the office Christmas party, have an eggnog, enjoy yourself. chances are very good it's going to have no effect on you whatsoever. Don't worry about it. But remember that our mental and emotional state about our body has very little to do with the actual condition of our body. There are people who have the perfect body in the world. They're lean and they're strong and they've got the perfect set of abs, and yet they feel terrible about their body. They're always criticizing themselves. There are people out there who are very, very, very lean, single digit body fat, and they're still asking me, how do I lose fat? How do I burn fat? How do I get leaner? It's like, dude, you are 9% body fat. You are good. Like, like you're trying to keep beating a dead horse to death. And yet there are people out there who arguably they got a little bit of a punch and they're like, I'm good. I don't want to lose any weight. That's fine. Because how we feel about our body is very, very loosely correlated to the actual state of our body. And when we understand that, that leaves us to a great opening of the ability to actually, for once and for all, feel good about our body, because we become more resilient inside when we are coming from a positive place about things. I like my body. I respect my body. I enjoy my workouts. I eat in a respectful way to my body. I'm not abusing drugs or alcohol or food and stuff. This is the mark of someone who is strong and resilient about such things. There's someone who can have a couple of chocolate chip cookies at the office Christmas party and not even bat an eye. They don't worry about it. They're not anxious about it. It's not, sending them into dietary anxiety tizzy like it used to for me from so many years. Like, yeah, it was a damn good cookie. All right, thanks very much. Happy Hanukkah, whatever. It's the mark of someone who is strong is someone who can have change happen, and it doesn't phase them in the slightest. Versus an individual, it's like, oh, shoot, that office Christmas party is during my spin class, so what do? I should show up to the party, but at the same time, I can't miss my spin class, or else I'm not going to burn fat in my optimal heart rate zone on Friday night, which I always have to do. And it's no, this is not strong, and we can argue all day long that that's the mark of someone who's disciplined, but it's not. It's someone who is no longer in charge of their habits. They're not calling their own shots. The shots are controlling it for them. And that's why they become more frail. Paul Bruce, man, it's good to see you again. How are you doing, man? I hope things are good in your world. But coming up with Swami Matt, man, I got another one of those videos I need to make in the new year. Got something fun I'm cooking up for you guys. But anyway, that's a little inside joke. Can you explain the flow warmups you've been using lately for your beautiful strength training videos? How do you recommend preparing for these sessions? Yeah, it's just playful, man. Playfulness and action. Warming up is our ability to communicate with our body and have our body communicate back. It's when we start moving just a little bit and we're like, so body, how you doing today? What feels strong? What feels loose? Does anything feel tight? Anything feel a little off a little bit? Like if I get down into some squats and my hips are like, oh boy, that's a tough steak. I'm like, okay, hips are a little tough today, probably because I was sitting and writing for 10 hours straight last night. All right, well, I'm gonna just gently go into shifting squats. Nah, feeling pretty tight. I'm gonna downshift into more like a shifting lunge, and I'm gonna keep my back knee on the ground. Okay, that's a little more gentle. That's easing into it a little bit. Okay, shifting back and forth, in and out, loosen up the hips, engaging the hips. Okay, feeling good. How about the upper body? Go into a downward dog position. Ooh, yeah, shoulders are feeling good today. Shoulders are feeling real good. Okay, T-plank, some dive bomber push. Yeah, okay, let's throttle these shoulders since these are feeling good. And we'll go through some light lunges for warming up the hips and stuff. That's literally how my training sessions work. Is I'm listening to my body, I'm respecting my body, I'm working what feels strong, I'm taking it easy on what doesn't feel quite as strong, I'm loosening up what feels tight, I'm spending maybe a little bit more time trying to flex and engage that which feels a little bit sleepy, and that's all there is to it. It's not a formula, it's not a set thing of like, okay, make sure you do this 5 times and then go into this exercise, but not before you do this other exercise. No, it's playfulness. I go into kind of those positions a lot more in my program, the Ultimate Minimalist Fitness program, about how when we just have the floor, we've got our bridge positions, our squat positions, and our plank and push-up positions. And basically just kind of flowing from one to the other, shifting around, moving front, back, being playful, looking for areas that I can move into to stretch that which is tight, engage that which is sleepy, and just see how things feel. And that's That's all there is to it. It doesn't need to be much more beyond that. Micah, DJ Micah, hey, what kind of music do you play? If you really actually are a DJ, or I don't know if that's a nickname or anything like that. But anyway, I digress. Do you think it matters what time of day you eat? Like if I eat a zugnat every night before bed for a week, is that detrimental to my health? No, the time of day is much less important. It's not honestly really that important at all. Some people like to eat twice a day. Some people once a day. I graze throughout the day. Bottom line, if I want food, I eat it. I don't care what time it is. If I wake up and I'm like, oh, boy, I'm not really feeling breakfast now, I'll go a while. I'll go several hours before I have breakfast. Usually I have it right, something to eat right away, just because I know I'm going to get really hungry and hungry as well. But yeah, I don't care if it's 2 a.m. and I'm like, oh boy, I could eat. Oh yeah, sure, let's go get pizza. Yeah, I will eat at any time of the day, but it's more important that you have the eating in response to your body rather than the clock. And he follows up, says, mobile DJ EDM. All right, cool. I'm going to look you up, my friend. Let me take a quick little screenshot of that. I want to find you, look up some of your musics. What do you like to play? It's always something. I'm always looking for some new stuff. But we'll see what we can find out there. Thanks very much for letting me know. Make high energy workout mixes. Excellent. Is that something we can find like on Spotify and things, or maybe something we can find on a website where you can support you? Drop like, I don't know if you can put a link in here or something like that, but I'd love to follow up on that. But anyway, we're talking about the resiliency of mind and body. Can you adapt to change? Now, it should be worth noting that resilience and weakness and stuff, like strength and the ability to be resilient, these things are not static. They can ebb and flow, my friend. It's not like you're going to be strong and resilient and then you're good and you're always fine, or if you're finding yourself being relatively fragile and weakness, that there's no hope for you, kind of thing. Because we're always transit. We're always changing a little bit. We're all just, what is that? We're all one bad day away from anarchy kind of idea. Like I can feel strong, I can be resilient, and just somehow have a bad crash on my mountain bike and tweak a little something in my back, takes nothing. And then for the next week, I'm just as weak and frail as ever. Mentally, I can be the same thing. I can be like, yeah, I'm fine. Like, house is burning down. All right, I'll get to that. No problem. All right, someone backed into me and dented up my car. Okay, no problem. But things start going south at work. Things get really stressful. Things go crazy. And suddenly I'm pissed off and yelling at the barista who put too much sugar in my coffee, right? We're all susceptible to this sort of thing. And so that's why we have to be on the lookout for it. Strength, physically, mentally, emotionally, these are things we always want to be trying to strive for and cultivate. You're never just strong. You're never just weak. It's always this ebb and flow kind of thing. And I don't want you to be beating yourself up about these things. If you're physically or mentally like, oh my gosh, I'm so pissed off. I just yelled at the mailman, for heaven's sake. And I just mentally crumbled the other day when, I just couldn't get the perfect workout in or something. That's fine. Be forgiving of yourself. Be gentle with yourself. Don't beat yourself up. That beating yourself up and all that negative self-talk is a symptom of a weak mind, a weak disposition. When we're berating ourselves like, God, you're so stupid. Why did I do that kind of thing? It's fine to have a momentary action of like, oh, geez, yeah, drove through 5 stop signs in a row. That was stupid of me kind of thing. But are you berating yourself for it and really beating yourself up? Don't do that. Don't do that. Be strong. Give yourself a little bit of leeway and forgiveness about these sorts of things. Because the mark of someone who is strong is someone who's forgiving, someone who can understand and be empathetic to the faults and the mistakes of not just others, but yourself as well. Be forgiving of yourself in that way. It goes a long way for your mental and emotional resiliency. So let's talk a few practical application things for how we can do this. Two tools that I want to give you. The first of which is adaptability. Adaptability is a key component in all the things we do here at Red Delta Project, both with diet, with exercise, even lifestyle as well. Because when we are unable to bend, that's when we break, because we're fragile. It's the old adage of the stubborn oak versus the pliable willow tree. So when we are adaptable, it's like, oh, my treadmill that I always run on is down. Okay, well, you know what? I haven't been on the rowing machine in a while. Let me give that thing a shot. Oh man, my shoulders are not feeling so good today. I was wanted to do dips, but I guess not. So, oh, maybe I'll just do lower body today, and I'll see about that tomorrow. That's adaptability. That's the ability to look at your circumstances and say, you know what, I don't think it's in my wheelhouse to do what I had planned, so I'm going to make a change. That comes from discipline. That is personal strength. And you don't get too hung up about it. It's like, yeah, I'm disappointed. I really wanted to do this thing here, but oh, what are you going to do? I'll do this other thing instead. The ability to adapt, change on the fly according to your circumstances, goes a long way at reducing the strain and stress on body, mind, and lifestyle to make you much, much more resilient, but also gives you new opportunities for making progress and advancing yourself potentially more than if you were like, oh, I can't stick to my optimal carb to protein ratio. I'm just going to blow my whole diet for the rest of the weekend versus saying, well, I guess we're doing spaghetti tonight. Okay, no problem. That's where the real strength comes from. And the other thing that really helps too, and this is usually given as financial advice, but it works too for fitness, because to a large degree, fitness really is a economical thing, is work and live within your means. Financially, sure, you don't spend every dollar you make out of every paycheck if you can't help it, but also don't put it all in the gym. Don't put as much effort as you can working yourself into the ground every single day in your efforts. Because when you have some left over, some energy, some resources left over, that gives you resilience. Usually, I notice for me, when I get sick, and sometimes it's not even so much I get sick, I just get really run down. I'm exhausted, my joints are achy, a little bit of sinus congestion. It's not quite a cold or anything. I can tell. I look back, I'm like, yep, I stayed out late every night. I pushed as hard as I could in every workout. I really tried to have a super strict diet, and I didn't allow myself any leeway whatsoever. And I worked myself into the ground with projects and things here for RDP until, as much as I could with every free hour of time. I didn't rest. I didn't sleep well. I didn't give myself recreation time, friends and family and stuff like that. Of course, I'm worn out, because when you're at your limit all the time, it takes nothing to tip you over that ledge. It's like my instructor with my hand in a wrist lock, right? He's using the very limit of my range of ability of the tendons and everything. Is always like, look, I can hurt him with just my pinky. Bink. And I'm like, ah, because the second you go over that ledge, you're in trouble. The analogy that always springs to mind is years ago, I took a trip to Ireland, and I went to the Cliffs of Moher, these sheer cliffs, they're hundreds and hundreds of feet straight down to the bottom of the sea, to the water down below. And it's like, wow, Cliffs of Moher and stuff. And there was at one point where I was not really near the edge of the cliff. I was a good 30 feet away, but I remember being really nervous about that, because it's like, that ledge right there, like literally 1 inch beyond that, and it is death. You're not coming back from that. And that really made me nervous, even though I was far enough away that I was fine. And that's the thing that you want to think about, is when you're at your very edge all the time, the chances of you getting pushed over that edge and having consequences and breaking is much higher. And sometimes you got to go to your edge. Sometimes that limit is there to be pushed, particularly in environments of competition, or if you just, well, I guess I got to get this project done and I've got 24 hours to do it. I'm not sleeping tonight. Sometimes that does happen, but it's a lot easier to endure those scenarios when you're not pushing yourself to your limits all the time. When I was in, again, college, we used to do these indoor cycling classes as part of our spring training. And they were 2-hour sufferfests, Mondays and Wednesdays. And at the end of every single one of them, I was like, I'm going to get sick. Not like stomach bug throwing up sick, but I'm gonna have a cold. Later that night, I'm like, yeah, I got that scratch in the back of my throat. My energy level is really low beyond the fatigue of the class. I'm going to basically make myself sick because I pushed too hard. And then a lot of times I would feel better within a day or two, and then I go do it all over again, right? It's no wonder that I was always sick in the winter during college, and because I was always going to the limit. And if I knew then what I know now, I would have been like, yeah, I'm going to do these sprints, but I'm only going to do two of the sprints all out. I'm going to have the other three sprints at like 80% of my effort. I'm not going to drive myself into the ground to full exhaustion every workout, because a big part of our fitness culture is if you're not driving yourself as hard as possible, you're leaving so much on the table. But there's a very big difference between pushing yourself to 80% effort and 100% effort. 80% effort, you're going to get most of your potential and probably even get more because you're able to recover better. But when you're always going to 100%, you may be compromising your results because you're not recovering quite as well, but also because you're more susceptible to injury, you're more susceptible to burnout, you're more susceptible to breaking because you are more fragile. So it's important to live within your means and utilize those points where you go all out in a very prudent basis and sparingly. A couple more here to finish off. Paul's coming on. Matt, on this topic, I'm wondering, what do you think of morning routines? Do you have any specific way to prepare your body, mind for the day? Do you think emphasis on these routines makes us frail? Well, it does if you're dogmatic about it. Remember, being addictive to something or addicted to something and dogmatic means that you're emotionally dependent on something or mentally dependent on something. So let's say, for example, you've got a little yoga routine you do every morning. Takes you 5 minutes, a couple sun salutations, downward dogs, all that sort of thing. Makes you feel really good, right? It's like, okay, great, awesome, go for it. I think it's a good idea to just kind of loosen up the body a little bit in the morning and just kind of engage muscle, turn it on, stretch out a little bit after the night. Good idea, sure. But when we become emotionally dependent on it, like we're addicted, and it's like all of a sudden you wake up one morning, you're like, I'm late for my flight. And you quickly throw stuff into the bag and boom, and you're gone and stuff. And then you're sitting on the plane and you're just anxious like crazy, like, oh, shoot, I didn't do my morning routine. That's a bad sign. So I have a daily workout routine that I do that's Taekwondo based. And it's every day of the week. I do this like 5-10 minutes of something that I do, but I do it every single day? No. Some days life just happens. Sometimes I'm just not up for it. Sometimes I just run out of time. Do I worry about it? No, because I adapt and I'm like, I'll do what I was going to do today, tomorrow. And if it's really bad, like I'm sick as a dog for 2 weeks, I'm like, I'm not going to make all that up. I'm just going to jump right back into the routine where I was. I don't worry about it. I don't get anxious about it, because does it really matter in the long run? No, not at all. It's good to have a bit of a routine at any point in the day, but when we become dependent on the routine is when we become fragile. When you can't change it, when you can't say, okay, I've only got 10 minutes, so I'm going to cut it in half, or I'm only going to do 2 sets instead of 5, or that exercise seems to be aggravating my ankle, I'm not going to do it. When you can't change it up, that's when you get into the black and white thinking. That's when you get that perfectionist mindset, which makes you fragile, which is a weakness. Perfectionism is very fragile, which is why it's very unattractive. The number of times that I've known fitness enthusiasts who are going after that perfectionist mindset, and their diet's got to be perfect, and their workout's got to be perfect, and their morning routine's got to be perfect, and everything. And it's no surprise that a lot of folks around him are like, oh, he's good, but God damn, he's driving me crazy. It's like, oh man, this guy is driving me absolutely nuts, because we go on vacation and we can't do anything every day until he does his workout. And we were hunting every grocery store for his optimal supplement profile and everything. It's like that kind of rigidity is unattractive for good reason. Because as humans, we have evolved to become attracted to those who can be an asset to the group, to our life, to bring things into our lives. And people who are too rigid, too fragile and stuff are not an asset to the group. They're a liability. It's like, okay, that person's going to slow me down if I'm trying to outrun a predator. That person's going to suck resources away from the tribe that we could all otherwise use to be stronger and stuff. So that's why inherently it makes us unattractive. I used to think in my mind, it's like, oh man, if I stick to this diet, no matter how hard it is for me, and no matter how much I bitch and moan about it to others, they're going to be really impressed by the fact that I can push myself this hard. They're going to be so impressed that I can go to the gym even though I'm sick because I'm staying disciplined on my workout routine. I was totally mistaken. People were like, what are you doing? Why are you here? It's like you're hacking and coughing and stuff. Everybody, no one wants you here, dude. It's like, no, I'm so strong. Aren't you impressed? No. Aren't you so impressed that I'm having an anxiety attack over the fact that I can't stick to my perfect diet here at the family picnic? It's like, no, you're just driving everybody crazy. It's not a good look. And that's why it's so important to be adaptive. It's so important to work within your means so you can basically loosen up and have fun. Last little bit of a story is like one time, I've told this before, I went to visit some friends in Germany when I was 17. I was so rigid about my workout routines, so rigid. No matter what, I had to get everything in every day, and I stuck to my guns like crazy. And then I went back to Germany several years later, and I had been much more relaxed. Sure, I'll have another beer with dinner. Why not? Kind of thing. I don't need to do the workout today. That's fine. No, I'm good. I'm good. I'll just do it later, kind of thing. And my friends who I was staying with, was like, oh man, Matt finally removed the stick out of his ass. Matt's finally starting to loosen up and have fun. And what do you think happened? People were like, hey, let's hang out more. Hey, let's go and explore the town tomorrow instead of oh, we're going to do this and you go do your thing and we're not even going to miss you kind of stuff. Fragility is something that we all contend with at times. Fragility in mind, body, and lifestyle. And that's fine. Everybody understands it. Everybody goes through it. But when we are seeking out habits and behaviors that promote fragility, it's not something that we want to actively pursue. You want to have things that make you resilient. And the tips we explored today will help you do that. And not only will it drastically reduce the stress on mind and your emotional stress and lifestyle stress and stuff, it's also a hell of a lot easier to build the body you want to, which looks a lot better anyway. FC saying training should be fun and not stressful. This is a very good point. I mean, it's stressful to some degree. There's burning in the muscle, you're getting your heart rate up and stuff like that. But as I always tell my clients, it should be challenging, but not a struggle. When things are inherently a struggle, especially a chronic struggle like with food and exercise, time to make some changes for sure. All right, my friends, thank you so much for coming on in. Your questions, Paul, good to see you again. Micah, it's so good to have you come on. Joseph, as always, everybody, much appreciated. Don't forget the new RDP Advent Calendar. First day is tomorrow. One new video about addressing beautiful strength every day up until December the 24th. So make sure that you're subscribed to the RDP YouTube channel, as well as the notifications and all that sort of thing, because I am going to be cranking out these videos. And it's not all going to be workout videos either, because in the past I've done that and people are like, I just can't do all these exercises. I just can't do all these workouts. It's going to be some exercises and workouts and stuff, but that's not going to be the entire thing. So thank you very much, everybody, coming on in. I will talk to you folks next week. Till then, be fit and live free.